Welcome to my podcast, Wise Flow. Today we will be talking about how to decrease your ego without becoming a doormat. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoy. My first special guest is my daughter, Joanne, who is a researcher of AI and neuroscience at Georgia State University. Hope you enjoy.
This video is called Reduce Your Ego and Still Command Respect. I really like this video a lot because it resonates with me in my current situation because I'm a grad student. We have to have a lot of group meetings. People are, just sharing kind of in an open format their ideas. But this comes up, I think, in any conversation that you have with people because there's kind of always this social hierarchy that people create. Maybe one person wants to share their idea and another person comes in and interrupts. This is just kind of an example.
And that's the way it is now in your workplace, where people have established a pecking order, so to speak.
You're in a social setting with a friend group, or maybe you're at work at kind of like a free-form discussion. You might be sharing your idea and then somebody interrupts and starts to share what they want to say. The question is, do you keep talking or do you allow that person to speak and you become silent? In one scenario, you're becoming submissive, but in the other scenario, if you keep talking, you're going to be more dominant, but you're also bordering being rude. What do you think about that kind of situation? If somebody interrupts you, do you keep talking or do you be quiet? Or some people would say, "Oh, excuse me, can you allow me to finish my thought?"
I think I might say that. I wouldn't have said that because I was more of a rug or a doormat type person. I would just be quiet for the rest of the whole thing and say, oh, well, nobody wants to hear me, let them talk. But now, at this stage in life, I think I may say, could I finish my point? Excuse me, could I finish my point? Thank you. I'd be polite about it, but I would try to finish my point. What about you?
I feel like in today's culture, actually somewhat of the appropriate thing to do is just to continue talking over the person.
Oh, just talk on over.
Because one person is going to submit and the other person is going to dominate in that kind of situation. Unless I've actually seen in certain circles where both people just keep talking. And it's honestly a little asinine and ridiculous. But I feel like that's something that comes up in this kind of conversation.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind rude, of behavior. Though. I feel like both people are rude in that way because, just to get louder and try to keep talking over the person, I would just go ahead and say, excuse me, do you mind if I finish my point?
I see it happen all the time in the circles that I'm in. And it's just kind of a funny human behavior that I feel like is kind of playing into this topic of reducing your ego and still commanding respect. In a way, I feel like there is an ego thing there, but how do you reduce your ego but still command respect? Because also too, there's a thing of humility. How do you balance humility with also commanding respect?
Well, I feel like saying, excuse me, can I finish my point? That's commanding respect, but in a respectful way. You're saying, I need to finish my point. And if they keep talking, I would probably say it louder.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't just start talking louder over the person. I probably would have to say, excuse me, can I finish my point, please? But I haven't been in meetings in years because I haven't worked in that kind of environment in a very long time, so I don't know what today's culture is. I'm sure the culture, like you say, has changed. People have changed. Things are different now. So I would have to relearn the culture, I think, if I got back into administrative work.
Yeah, I think it's hard to know, too, how to balance it, especially being a lady in the workplace. It's hard because I guess typically working was more of a male-dominated thing in the industry.
Yeah.
So it was full of masculine energy. Now, as a woman, you still want to bring a feminine energy, but that's kind of a conflict of being dominant in the workforce. You also have to kind of be aggressive in business, but at the same time, no one really likes an egotistical asshole, So it's hard to know exactly how to balance it. But let me watch a little bit more of your video.
Okay, what is ego? Ego is your sense of self-importance. When it's too big, it can hurt relationships. When it's too small, people can run all over you. So, today we're talking about how to decrease ego without losing your voice and how to showcase your work without sounding boastful.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, showcasing your work, because I think now in the current job culture and social culture around, the professional workplace, it's really important to be like visible at work now. So to a lot of other people that might seem like kind of braggish and stuff like that. But nowadays, especially with stuff like Teams and Slack, which are just kind of like private messaging apps for the workplace that people use, a lot of people are kind of working visibly in front of other people by like messaging and these group chats and stuff.
I also think listening is important as well. That's part of what I was saying in the video, is being a good listener, because that's something I've worked on too, is becoming a better listener, actually listening to the person and not thinking and being in my head thinking about what am I going to say next? How am I going to respond to what they're saying? I mean, you can kind of do that, but you need to actually listen to what that person is saying. I think that's part of being empathetic as well. Empaths, I think, have a little bit maybe harder time with this kind of stuff, and not wanting to hurt anybody's feelings and stuff like that. But really in business, it's not about that. And that's another thing, is staying out of your feelings. For me, that's harder. And I kind of got off topic there with being a good listener, but yeah.
Yeah, because okay, like coming into the workplace, I didn't really realize how important it is, not really the work that you do, but how you're working. Because, you can sit there all day with your head down, working hard, but that really doesn't matter at all. What you do does not matter that much. You know why? Because what does it matter what you do if you're not communicating with everybody around you what you're doing?
Okay.
Because really, nobody notices that. Everybody assumes that you're not doing anything unless you start communicating it. So, that's part of something that's like a soft skill that you actually have to learn going into the workplace. But it's also kind of just true about other social circles too.
Well, what are some ways you do communicate and showcase your work, other than a meeting? Or what are some, emails, presentations? I think a presentation is a good way to showcase your work, because that is something everybody does. It's considered, a presentation. You're not just, I don't know.
Well, okay, so I guess the reason why I brought this up is because I feel like there's like a new mode of working, in which is like kind of bragging about everything that you're doing. And I feel like that kind of conflicts with my idea of like controlling my ego, because you almost have to be a little egotistical to brag about yourself and everything that you're constantly doing. But that's that's like the new mode of existence now, not only at work. And you're asking how do you facilitate that? Personally, it's not like I really want to do this. It's just kind of like an observation that I have about how people work and exist now. But how does it happen? It happens through social media. And I'll give an example of like at work example, and then an example of just your social existence. Because everything has gone really virtual, obviously, after COVID. So like, if somebody gets a new position, they almost always will post on LinkedIn, I'm happy to share with everyone that I just accepted a new position at blah blah. And then everybody gives their little likes. And so in everybody's mind, they're checking a box about that person. They're reminded of that person, that person exists, and then they're like, oh, I see that that person's successful. I see that this person is working at this company. So now, in my mind, this person is in my network. If I need to get a job at this place, or if I have any interest with this company, I know who I can reach out to. But then an example in personal life is how people post on Facebook about every little thing that their children are doing. People post about every little thing that they're doing, like, I'm happy to share with everybody that I just finished my law degree and I'm now going to be a lawyer. Or I'm happy to share with everybody that I just got my degree and I'm going to be a doctor. And or they'll post like, little Johnny just graduated kindergarten, guys, and then they get a bunch of claps and stuff like that. Or they'll be like, guys, I just bought my house, post a picture of them. So that's like the new mode of existing. And that's like, I feel like somewhat contradicting the ego. Because I feel like nowadays, to be successful, you almost have to build up an ego of yourself.
Yeah, I feel like a platform like LinkedIn, that's different. That's kind of like a resume.
Yeah.
So when it's not really bragging to put your professional achievements on a platform like LinkedIn, because
Mm-hmm.
that's your resume. That's
Mm-hmm.
how you get jobs, and that's how you do have to showcase there. So I feel like that's a completely different thing than going on Facebook and bragging about your house or bragging about your kids. It's okay to post, I think, about, accomplishments of your children, maybe,
But that's
not
how
to
you stay
excess,
relevant.
Huh?
But nowadays, that's kind of how you stay relevant.
Yeah.
And for some people and for most people, they care about staying relevant, and it's kind of vital for them to continue their success, to stay relevant. But for me personally, I just kind of struggle with that idea because I feel like it's an ego thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's a bit narcissistic, but maybe it's not. I don't know. I go back and forth on should I be
I go
posting?
back and forth too, like that. I just like you have to be visible, but I just feel like there's a way to do it without being a jerk.
Let's watch a little bit more of your video because I feel like you give some really good tips for that.
Okay.
What decreasing your ego really means. It's not about thinking less of yourself. It's about thinking of yourself less often. Shift your focus from self-glorification to self-awareness. Stay grounded. Acknowledge your strengths and your weaknesses honestly. Remember, a healthy ego serves you, but an inflated ego rules you.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of difference in, being proud of yourself and proud of your work. Walking around like, look at me. You can just tell. What do you think?
Okay, well, you say a healthy ego serves you, but an inflated ego rules you.
Yeah.
I guess visibility is something that people entering the workforce are going to have to start doing. And that's part of the healthy ego.
Mm-hmm.
But I always fear putting my foot in my mouth. So I feel like over bragging would be an example of allowing your ego to catch up with you, and then you share stuff that you shouldn't share. I'm the kind of person that I want to share as little about myself at work as possible, because I feel like I don't want to share some information that would be a conflict with my position and my duties.
Right.
And I even, maybe it's like some kind of a paranoia that I have. I even feel kind of that way about social circles as well. Like, I don't want to share some information that, might hurt somebody or they might use to hurt me.
Yeah, because it seems like the more people know about you, especially about your personal life, they're going to use against you.
Mm-hmm.
Like a weakness.
And like social media platforms, it just gives people a way to like have like a podium where they feel like they can just sit there and brag about every event in their life. Like, oh, I just farted today, guys. I wanted to let you know. But I mean, and I feel like after COVID, everybody became so isolated, and it just only exacerbated the issue of everybody being so egocentric. Everybody being so centric about their life. Well, this is what my family's doing today, and I could care less about what little Johnny and his family are doing.
I feel like if everybody knows everything about you, there's nothing, you become boring after that. It's like, oh, well, I know everything about that person. There's no mystery. I don't even want to see them again or talk to them. I know everything about them. I know how they are. So part of it is losing some of your mystique too, if you give away every detail of your life.
And that plays into ego as well. You're like, oh, okay, I want to preserve my mystique.
Exactly. See, it's so tricky.
And I'll never give anyone the power over me by showing them who I truly am.
Right. So that's egotistical too.
But part of giving up your ego is being open with people.
Transparent.
But there's a way, I feel like, that it can go too far. Like when you first meet somebody, should you share with them your entire family story, your whole life story?
No.
And it's kind of like, when is the appropriate time to reveal that information, if ever?
Well, some shouldn't be ever, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Your personal life is your personal life. You could say, I'm married and have 2 children. You don't have to say, yeah, we have a fight at least twice a week. And then, we make up and have makeup sex. You don't have to talk about all that, Yeah. But just sharing the basics, that, yeah, we live in a house, we're married, we have children, if people ask you personal questions, you can always say, well, that's my personal life, and I don't really want to share that.
Allowing your ego to rule you, I feel like it would be, this kind of behavior is rewarded in our society, but, becoming so cutthroat that you would do anything to get a promotion, or that you would do anything to get ahead financially and stuff like that, or that you would do anything to look better than so-and-so.
Right.
I feel like that's where you would allow your ego to rule you. But then again, that's kind of how life works. That's kind of, I feel like, isn't that how everybody gets ahead?
It's kind of primal, actually.
Yeah.
You just watch a, chicken coop.
Yeah. We develop a pecking order wherever we are.
Exactly.
Everybody does. All right, let's see what else your video says.
And then you have your lone wolves.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I am.
Yeah.
Who, refuses to, if I'm going to be, I don't want to be the pecker, but I don't want to get pecked.
You don't want to be the peck.
So I don't want to be the pecker, and I don't want to get pecked. So I just get out of the brood,
Yeah, but that's also a statement on ego as well.
Exactly.
You're like not willing to participate.
Yeah.
And I feel like, not just you, but just that sentiment in general. And I feel like I kind of wish that we had more of a community outlook in our society, in American society.
Oh, yeah.
I kind of wish that we had more of a community outlook. And I feel like possibly we did a few decades ago.
Yes, we did.
But I feel like it's degraded and become more an individualistic society.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That comes
just like trying to make
friends
friends with the neighbors around here. You can't do it. They don't want to. So
it's hard to communicate, with people.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like having a community, it comes with a lot of pros, and it potentially comes with cons. Where, like, for example, in a community, they have standards, group standards, and maybe they bully people that don't meet those standards, and that's how they keep everybody in line.
That starts in grade school,
Yeah.
bullying and pecking,
Yeah.
and gets worse at middle school, and then culminates in high school.
Yeah. And then I guess it just keeps
Goes
going.
right into the workforce.
And I guess, that can be that kind of form of bullying could have, obviously cons, but it could have pros. Like, I guess, in some societies, for example, if you throw litter down, they might, publicly humiliate you.
Yes.
Or, if you are disrespectful to someone, they might, gang up on you and beat you up. I mean, is that a good thing? Debatable.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. That's like if I'm working on my ego. I watch Eckhart Tolle, or Tolle, however he says his name. Nobody knows for sure because he never says his name because that's egotistical.
Exactly. So
it's hard to know what is ego. And see, I just talked over you. I'm like, that was egotistical. Like everything I do basically is my ego. I'm like, I'm always thinking about myself. What are people going to think about me? Or how am I going to look on this video? That's so egotistical,
Like
how do you fight that?
How do you balance humility with with assertiveness when assertiveness is required.
Right.
Because
I feel like it's different in the workplace than it is in your personal life, but maybe it's not. I don't know.
well, I mean, I feel like I don't, maybe there are some cultures that really highly value humility. But in American culture, I notice, at least from my perspective, humility is seen as weakness. It's seen as submissiveness.
Yes. And the way I was raised was, you don't brag about anything. You don't toot your own horn, so to speak. You don't go about saying, "Oh, look what I did," and that hurt me. I think because I became just this sort of wallflower because I was afraid to say anything.
Yeah.
And it's like if somebody, my mother would say, if somebody tells you you're pretty, you just don't say anything. You might say thank you, but you don't go ahead, you don't act like that, you don't act any certain way, and I don't know what I'm trying to say there, but.
I know what you're saying. I mean, I think maybe in some cultures, for example, when you receive a compliment, it's rude to say, "Oh yes, thank you, I know."
Right. I would never say I know.
I see there's a lot of merit in that, and I personally want to practice that in my life.
And I used to say, if somebody gave me a compliment, "Oh, your hair's pretty," "Like your makeup," or "That's a pretty dress," I say, "Oh no, it's not. I'm ugly. This old dress, ugh." I would always say something like that. Because even if I didn't agree and I thought that morning I looked nice, I still would say, "Oh no, thank you anyway." But now, if I do get a compliment, I say thank you. I just say thank you.
In a lot of ways, what you just described is a form of etiquette.
Yeah, that's what it was in my day. But I don't think the culture's like that anymore.
But now it's like, if you don't seek it out, if you don't blatantly come out and ask for it, you're not going to receive that.
Yeah.
If you don't ask.
And why should I have to get that? That's validation. Do I need to be? I don't feel anymore like I need to be. I sit here and say that. I don't feel I need the validation. But at the same time, if I don't get it, I feel kind of sad.
Well, I think everybody needs a form of feedback. It's a feedback loop,
Yeah.
You try something and then somebody else observes it and gives you feedback, and you use that feedback to correct yourself, improve yourself. It's hard to make those improvements when you're just seeing your hand in front of your face.
Mm-hmm.
That's why feedback loops are important, I feel. But I mean, I personally want to practice humility in my life, and I don't care how it's perceived by other people, because I feel like that's a value that I want to embody in my life, and I don't really care how other people perceive it, because I feel like that's just something that's important in life. But how do you balance that humility with commanding respect? It's almost, in a way, maybe it's a conflict of interest, but maybe not. Maybe you can just command respect with your own actions.
Yeah.
Because maybe if somebody looks at you, they'll admire that. I don't know.
Well, I feel like, okay, going back to the workplace, because I did work a long time in corporate, settings. So as administrative assistant. So I saw a lot of backstabbing, a lot of, people climbing over each other to get somewhere, doing unscrupulous things to get somewhere. And, I just saw that happening and, participated in some of it my own self, and it was ugly. And I think that you can command respect without being unscrupulous.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what needs to be learned, is how to do that, how to be assertive, and how to command respect. You have to earn respect and not command respect. You have to actually earn respect. And I think you do that by being fair and honest and not backstabbing and not walking over somebody else to get there. I feel like so much of that goes on. I don't know anymore because I haven't worked in that environment in a long time. But back then, and we didn't have social media. We didn't have the internet and all that. We had just gotten computers and just gotten email. Even the email started crap.
I feel like back in your day, because I feel like this is a skill that's being lost, if it has not already been lost and severely deteriorated with, like, at least my age group, which is how to have a conversation, the art of a conversation,
Face to face.
how to be tactful and witty in a social circle. That's something that I really don't know how to do. Did you see a lot more of that? How did conversations look?
Conversation was so much better and so much more, less. I think conversation was less guarded, maybe. You didn't worry about, like somebody told me, you look nice today. I wasn't offended. Or I might say, oh, Joe, you look hot today. I don't think anybody would have accused me of sexual harassment back in that day. They would have just said, laughed and said, gee, thanks, Stuff like, I don't know. That's kind of off a little bit, and I'm not saying you should do that, but it was just more free flowing. I think the conversation was.
And I feel like a lot of conversation is now highly specialized conversation as well. People will be talking about a very specialized topic, like a hip topic. Again, if you don't really know much about that domain, then you have nothing to add.
Yeah.
That's how I feel like conversation has more. It's kind of like a way of asserting yourself, being able to hold a conversation. Because then people can look at you and kind of size you up, Your ability to kind of jump in and socialize. Your ability to kind of jump in, get in where you fit in like a social context. Oh, this is another good point.
We gotta set clear boundaries. There we go again with our boundaries. Always important to have our boundaries. Practice saying no respectfully when you need to.
I feel like that's a very good point, because if you just say yes to everything, yeah, in a way it kind of makes you eventually become a doormat. But from time to time, it's healthy to say no. And I think it demonstrates to people that you do have boundaries. What do you think about that?
Oh, I agree. I think if you say yes all the time, you actually become less valuable.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, because if they say, oh, Nancy's gonna always say yes. She must not think much of herself, or, what is she trying to do? And we know. We know she's going to say yes, so she's not even that special.
That's a good point, because what you said about you actually become more valuable when you say no, you're almost like creating a rarity. You're making your time slightly more rare.
Yeah, and is that egotistical? I don't think so. I think that's just protecting yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a boundary.
I was just in RN2 CEO's live, watching her replay, and that was one of the main things she was talking about. We got to learn how to say no respectfully and mean no. Know your limits. Humility doesn't mean self-sacrifice. Speak with assertiveness, not aggression.
That's something that I feel like I struggle with, but it's hard for me to gauge if I'm being aggressive or I'm being assertive, because for me personally, I am a female and I want to represent feminine energy, but at the same time, obviously aggression is counter to that. But I also want to be feminine. I want to bring my feminine energy. I want to embrace my femininity, but at the same time, obviously, I want to be assertive when it's required.
Yeah, I think that's a really hard one for women.
And it's just, I guess that's something that we're kind of still navigating in our society, is how assertiveness in women is interpreted.
Yeah, because a man can be assertive and strong and, even get mad and he's respected, but we're a bitch when we do it.
And I think it's probably, well, not probably, I'm sure it is harder for women of color as well, because that's
absolutely.
a microaggression, I guess.
Yeah.
When women of color are perceived as being overly aggressive. So that, I guess, so those are all things that we're just having to learn how to navigate as a society.
Yeah.
But I feel like sometimes I might come off as aggressive, and I think this is another big part of ego, which is taking yourself too seriously.
Yes.
But I feel like that's something that's incorrectly perceived for women. because it's okay for men to take themselves seriously.
Exactly.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just
No,
projecting
that's
something.
the point I was trying to make too, because I'm just thinking about the way I look at a man. I love to see a big, strong man take charge and be in charge and not take any crap from anybody. But if I see a woman, I have to even say, even I do this. So I see a woman, I think, dang, she's a bitch. Why? Who does she think she is? We shouldn't be thinking like that.
You see a man, okay, with a scowl, and you just say, "Oh, he's focused.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he's locked in." But then you see a woman with a scowl, and you're like, "Oh,
she must be about to start her period."
who pissed in her cornflakes this morning?"
Yeah, exactly. We're expected to always have a little smile and a little giggle.
Yep.
And a little wiggle.
So it's hard, and I feel like I'm constantly analyzing myself, worrying that I'm coming off as aggressive. And I don't want to sound that way, but I think it happens. And that's another thing, taking yourself too seriously. And I feel like it's a developing trend. Do you feel like people started taking themselves too seriously, whereas maybe back a few decades ago, people were more lighthearted and less serious?
I think people were more lighthearted, and I think we were serious, just in a different way, if that makes sense. I don't know. I don't remember being as worried about things like, am I going to say the wrong thing, or offend somebody with something I said. People weren't. Maybe if people were offended, they didn't say they were or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And there are certain things we should have changed about the way we were. You shouldn't go to work and talk about, oh, you look hot, or you look sexy in that dress, or we shouldn't be talking to each other like that. But I feel like it's okay to say you look nice.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that should be taken in a bad way, but maybe I'm wrong about that. We probably should just go to work and just do our jobs and not have any kind of any other kind of engagement. I don't know. We're human, so I don't know how you do that.
And in personal life too. I mean, I feel like even people just out in the wild are just kind of taking themselves a little bit too seriously, taking everything a little bit too seriously. Yeah. I'm the prime example of that, and I struggle so much with that. Like, how do I become more laid back without it feeling forced? Without it feeling disingenuous?
And without it looking like you don't care.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know.
Without looking sloppy.
Right. It's hard to find that happy medium.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that's something that I personally want to work on as well, I guess. Because I feel like this is related to ego. Because a lot of people might say, you clam up, you're too serious, and that's due to your ego. You're scared of opening up. Because, you don't want to compromise the view that people have of you. I don't know.
Yeah, I used to do the opposite, and that messed me up a lot. I used to just blab my whole life. I still have a propensity for that, but I've tried to rein that in a little bit. I used to just tell everybody at work everything. I had a fight last night with my boyfriend or my husband, whatever it was, and no.
Do people use that against you?
Yes, they do.
Wow.
It's a weakness that they hone in on.
That's crazy.
Out fully before responding. This shows
Here's active listening.
instead of blaming or demeaning someone.
You know what? Let me rewind this because this is talking about the assertiveness versus aggression.
She was talking about we got to learn how to say no respectfully and mean no. Know your limits. Humility doesn't mean self-sacrifice. Speak with assertiveness, not aggression. Use I statements. I feel, I believe, instead of blaming or demeaning someone. Remain calm, steady tone, even when standing your ground. Don't let your emotions take over, but you can still stand your ground.
I guess that's a really good point because remaining even-toned and honestly taking a lot of the emotion out of it and just kind of staying logical, I guess is a really good way to stay assertive without coming off as aggressive.
That's a good point. And women are perceived a lot of times. I even saw a YouTuber, and recently, that said women are not logical. Women think with their emotions and act with their emotions, and I had to disagree with that because that's not always the case. That women cannot be logical.
Well, I think it's like it's an illogical statement to make, and a blanket statement about a certain group.
Exactly.
People,
that's stereotyping people.
Yeah.
If you're stereotyping a race, or if you're stereotyping a gender, you're saying all women are illogical. That's not right. And I told this person, I said, I'm a logical person. And they answered back, well, I guess it's possible. And I have to admit, that made me so angry. I was angry with that YouTuber, and I never went back over there again because it was a man, and I just felt offended by that. But why was I offended by that,
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
I mean, he's just given his opinions, and that's his opinion. So, that it just pissed me off so bad.
Yeah, and that's the fire I feel like that we have as women,
And I'm being emotional about it. See, He's right. He got me.
Okay, practice active listening.
Listening. Hear people out fully before responding. This shows respect without submission. Choose your battles wisely.
Yeah, I feel like that is a super good point. I feel like people who actively listen make me feel good about myself. And when somebody makes me feel good about myself, that makes me instantly like that person. That makes me instantly like that person. Someone who genuinely listens and someone that really makes me feel good about myself, it makes me like that person a lot for some reason. And I feel like, I don't know, that's a good way to command yourself without being an asshole.
Yeah.
Every disagreement doesn't need a confrontation. Humility includes discernment. That is a very egotistical thing.
Humility.
Discernment. Discerning what is,
That's powerful.
Yeah, discerning in a situation. It's hard to sometimes to be able to think on your feet, without getting your emotions in there and discerning what's actually going on here, and how am I going to respond?
That's powerful.
And sometimes, you get that little adrenaline kick when you feel attacked, or you feel,
But are they really attacking you?
But are they really attacking you? Right. But you get that fight or flight response.
That's ego.
That's ego. So you have to learn, okay, what do I do with this? And how do I call it the snap. How do I not snap on somebody when I get that adrenaline, when I get that offended thing? That's a very learned skill,
What was that line again? Let me rewind that. That was a good line.
A disagreement doesn't need a confrontation. Humility includes discernment.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It also comes down to practice. Like when you get in that situation, you just have to learn how to stop.
I think it would be a good idea to do practice situations, like have somebody, like say we did it, you attack me in a way, say, not attack me, but just say, hey, I don't like that, what you said or did, and then how, practice how you react. I don't know if that would work.
Yeah, I think,
but if it is a practice.
Sometimes a conversation requires a pause, and learning how to pause, especially when you're in that heat of the moment, if somebody offends you, learning how to pause and process.
Yeah, that's a key point right there, that pause. Because when you get that fight or flight, that adrenaline rush, when you get mad, the snap thing, if you could pause right there.
Like, that's something that's kind of counterintuitive to how we socialize, at least in an American setting, because that's all I know about. But it's awkward, for example, if you're having a typical conversation, to just stop and look at somebody for a few seconds. Just stop, don't talk, and look at them. That's kind of an awkward
thing.
Yeah.
But I think it would be useful in a situation like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're asserting your dominance, but you're just not saying anything because you're thinking.
I think, for me, that snap, what I call snap, is I have to come up with some kind of technique, something that I do,
Like a mantra type.
like a mantra or
or
a
a cue.
tapping thing that I would have to start doing to actually initiate that new response.
Like if you feel triggered, like for example, in a conversation, and you feel like pushed to say something and put your foot in your mouth, maybe just stop and look at the person for a few seconds and process.
Well, what I did the last time I had a situation like that, I left the room. Should I have stood my ground?
That's a way of standing your ground.
But that's what I thought. I thought it's best for me to leave.
Yeah.
And, he followed me. And I still just kept silent. But I felt defeated. Because
Yeah.
I let him get away with saying that to me.
I guess in some ways, silence is a form of submission. Not doing anything is a
Is
form
that
of
submitting,
submission.
or is that just not, is that gray rocking? Because I went through this phase of I want to gray rock gaslighting.
Well, I think when it comes to dangerous people, really the only way to address people like that is to completely cut them out of your life.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, what do you do?
And, it's like I don't want him cut out of my life totally. So gray rocking is how I handle it. It usually puts the fire out faster. Stand in your ground,
Every disagreement doesn't need a confrontation.
Yeah, that it goes along with that. This goes along with everything. Doesn't have to be a confrontation. And I feel proud of myself when I can walk out of the room and not confront it and fight. To me, that's a win.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I feel a little bit defeated, but I don't think it's a defeat.
Yeah.
And maybe that would work in the workplace if you are, confronted by somebody and you feel that they are completely wrong. Somebody accused you of something you didn't do or whatever. Well, that's a different thing. But like if somebody is just pushing your buttons, the best thing to do is to not respond.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it's different in the workplace. So when you have a personal relationship that you value, then it's worth working it out with that person so that you guys can just work through that obstacle and continue to have that relationship. But if you feel like that person is abusive enough, then you should really just cut them out of your life because you feel like they're dangerous enough to where they endanger you and your well-being. But then I feel like when it comes to the workplace, you just have to do your job. You have to have proof that you're doing your job. And if somebody's bothering you, then you don't necessarily have to work out that relationship because it's just a purely like utilitarian work relationship.
Right.
You guys
That's
don't-
like, that's how I used to, even in the workplace, I would, if somebody was, there's always somebody. Everywhere I've ever been, there was somebody that was my nemesis, And my personal way of handling that is to not handle it.
Yeah, because honestly, and you're bringing up a really good point too, it's about ego, it's about asserting yourself, and it's about, not every disagreement has to result in a confrontation. But there's almost always going to be that one person at work that comes in and that gets on your nerves. But the thing that you got to remember about this situation is honestly fairly easy to work out. If somebody's getting on your nerves at work, chances are that you're not the only person that they annoy. That this
Right.
person's getting on a lot of other people's nerves. And these people almost always have some kind of a characteristic about themselves to where they destroy themselves.
That's true.
And if you can play the long game, 9 times out of 10, you'll outlive that person.
That's very good advice right there.
You just need to leave it alone and don't get involved with them. And if you do have to work with them directly, just do as little to incriminate yourself.
Yeah.
And just do your job.
Just do your job, exactly. And
And have
not,
proof that you do your job.
yeah, and prove it, and just be upfront and honest and fair with everybody you work with.
And then this says, another point that you make in this video is make your work known without sounding boastful. This plays into that. You have to, whether it's in the workplace or I guess just in any kind of relationship, family relationship. This doesn't really play into, I guess, personal relationships, make your work known without sounding boastful. But I guess it could come into your creative space. You know, obviously, if you're a creative and you want to share that with somebody, you have to make your work known. You have to market your work. That's part of the process. But you don't necessarily want to sound boastful about it. So, and then obviously in the workplace, you need to do your job and you need to have proof that you're doing your job. So other people around you need to be aware of it. But let's see what you say about this point.
You feel like if you are not constantly boasting or you're not constantly telling everybody how good you've done and what you've accomplished and look, I just published this paper, I'm great, you know. If you're not constantly boosting yourself, nobody will, right? Or you feel like you may fade into the background if you don't do that. So let's focus on the value that we provide. Highlight what your work does for others, not just what you accomplished.
That's a really, really good point. I feel like it's super important to make people aware of the why behind why you're doing it. And not only to other people should be aware of the why, but you should know your own why, because that's what drives you. Even in your, everybody should have a reason why they're doing their work.
Right.
It's an expression of some kind of a value that you have. And if you can communicate that with other people are going to be on board too.
If you made it this far, I hope you enjoyed the podcast audio. Stay tuned for more informative podcasts in the future. Thank you for listening.